All right, so now we're diving into Chapter 12 of Sensors. Chapter 12 talks about a lot of practical applications, and it throws out some terms which are very useful if you're in the industrial world. These tend to be terms you see in process manufacturing. In other words, you're probably not going to see them if you're making widgets. You're probably not going to see them if the only pressure you see is part of a steam system. These are going to be in measurement of systems that are large tanks and other things like that. The chapter starts off with just a general description of some terms. So here's the most important terms you should remember: a dry leg and a wet leg. The diagram kind of says it all. A dry leg, right, is a way of sending the atmospheric pressure above any liquid that you're measuring in the tank. And this vapor or airspace is by definition dry. There's no liquid up in there. The wet leg then measures from below that. And that way, when I do a pressure, I'm measuring the pressure, excuse me, using the wet leg against one side of my gauge and the dry leg as the kind of the atmosphere or the other side of the gauge. And that's an accurate way of helping me understand how much liquid I have in my tank. And there's a couple other terms in here as well. You can have something called a seal pot, which is a kind of a surge tank in case you get extra liquid in there. And you don't want your extra liquid, you know, to be forced into the manufacturing process. So dry leg and wet leg, just are basic terms for how you set up these tanks if you're going to measure pressure at the bottom. We go through some basic measurement techniques, and it steps you through that. Here we're using the pressure and the height, and we also use the density. So the density of the liquid is applied to this. So it doesn't have to be water. And the density of liquid they have units of measure is inch-pounds per cubic inches. I'm going to kind of skip over the manometer measurements. It just takes you through some of the math based on the height of that liquid, how you would measure the pressure created. It talks about different common liquid measuring. Mercury is used a lot, at least it used to be used a lot, and it's being slowly kind of removed from many measurement systems because of mercury poisoning. We don't want mercury in our environment. So I'm going to skip over all this manometer stuff. You should understand all these terms. I don't know that you need to go through the whole purging process, though. Manometers can be blown completely. You can blow the liquid right out of a manometer if you don't open and close the valves properly. If you pop it open, that built up pressure inside of it can throw all of your liquid all over the ground. So follow the procedures for cutting in the manometer. Gauge protection is very important for us. We need to make sure that if we put a sensor in there, it's not going to be destroyed by our process fluid. A lot of times we put sensors in to measure something that's highly caustic or highly acidic. If you remember, caustic means it's high basic, and it could destroy a lot of equipment. So you need to select your equipment very, very carefully. And we also need to select against overpressure. So you see something called check valves in place that will let the material escape down a tank line if it goes too high over the allowed system pressure. And let's just kind of, you're going to have to read through all these different sealing systems talking about protecting manometers, over temperature protection. That's all good stuff. All that stuff is good. Read about it. This is not critical for us, but it's good to know these terms. Calibration. anytime you're going to see the word calibration, you guys should have little dollar signs light up as potential engineers or technicians. Calibration out in the industrial world is where a lot of time and money is spent. So reading through how you do your pressure calibration, comparing the reading of a gauge to some sort of highly calibrated device, and then making adjustments so that the gauge then matches your highly calibrated device. That's a whole process technicians need to go through over and over and over. And here they're going to take us through a couple different testing devices for pressure. And you can read about them. Oh, they don't really have much on the way of those testing devices though, do they? The one that you're going to see most of all, and the one I've used, is your electronic calibration devices. And you've got your different sensors you can attach, hook up to a wire to your calibration device. Then you can hook up that to a computer. All of the newer devices don't look like this. This is an old school serial port device. Newer devices are much better. They hook up to USB ports or they are Bluetooth. And that is all I'm going to talk about today.